Hello, Pastor Stuart here with another midweek Bible study video. We continue our reading through the book of Proverbs, and tonight we're going to look at a few different verses from a few different chapters. And like we've said in previous videos, the book of Proverbs, it's not a narrative story, so sometimes it just kind of hits good advice, good advice, good advice, good advice. And it doesn't always kind of like the list of good advices in a chapter doesn't always like have a lot to do with each other. But if you kind of look around and connect the dots, then you can find good verses that do have a lot to do with each other that are kind of spread around through the other chapters. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. And as we read them, you'll start to hear some maybe running themes from these verses and the previous verses and lessons that we've done so far. And it's going to make us realize that different aspects of wisdom are connected to each other. You can't just be kind of wise in one area and not in another. As you grow, you grow. And as you mature, everything about you grows and matures as you develop wisdom. So we'll hear a lot of connections to our study from last week. Last week, it was all about speech, like the words that we use. And in the verses we read last week, it said that reckless words can lead to violence and even ruin in your lives and others. So this week, we're going to talk about how that can happen and maybe where that kind of harsh speech can come from, because these verses tonight we're going to read are talking about anger and how the anger we feel relates to wisdom. And as I thought about just the issue of anger, I think long before COVID, the epidemic that our country really suffered from was an epidemic of anger. It just seemed like more and more people were getting upset, were getting angry, cantankerous, short-tempered, short fuses. Think about people with road rage who end up killing other drivers, or parents at sports games who just lose their cool and attack other parents or coaches or the ref or something. It just seems like we have a real problem how to express or deal with our anger, because we just keep more and more people keep flying off the handle and just losing their cool. So the verses we'll read today talk about that, and they're really helpful because they give us options for how to express our anger. And that is really important to note. These verses help us to express our anger. Proverbs doesn't say, all right, the verses we'll read, they don't say, don't get angry, never get angry, never feel the emotion of anger. No, they don't say that, because anger is just an emotion that we all feel from time to time. And what Proverbs wants us to do is to help us find mature ways to handle that anger when it starts bubbling up in us, so that it doesn't explode and be destructive. It's going to come. It's going to come up. We're going to feel it. We're going to have it. So we can either let it explode in harmful, unhelpful ways, or we can recognize it and figure out what's going on and figure out how to deal with it in helpful ways. Of course, that's what Proverbs wants to help us to do. So first, let's read 3 verses in Proverbs. I'll read chapter 12, verse 16, and I'll also read from chapter 14, verses 17 and 29. Okay, here's 12:16. A fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent man overlooks an insult. Chapter 14. A quick-tempered man does foolish things, and a crafty man is hated. A patient man has great understanding, but a quick-tempered man displays folly. Okay, so these verses have excellent advice. And I don't know if you noticed, but they were all about a certain theme. It was the idea of speed, how fast we feel and act. They're about how if we can be slow and patient, or if we are too fast and hasty and reckless. So again, these verses lay out the two ends of the wise, foolish spectrum that Proverbs does very often to show like a totally wise person will do this, a totally foolish person will do this. And again, we say this every week. None of us are all this way wise, and other people aren't all this way foolish. Okay, so don't give yourself a big head thinking I'm all this way, other people all this way. It's a spectrum, and sometimes we can move back and forth. But Proverbs is showing us what walking in wisdom looks like and walking in foolishness looks like. And the two ends of this spectrum, when it comes to anger and behavior, it gives quick-tempered or patient, reactive or thoughtful. Do we want to be hasty, or do we want to respond on purpose? And we see examples of this in life all the time. There's probably been some times that we were the bad example when we acted too fast and we showed our annoyance at once, and we just, flew off the handle before we stopped and thought about what might actually help. It's very natural. That happens to us all. When it does happen, you need to recognize it, apologize for it, and make amends. And maybe you've done that before, or someone else has done that for you. Maybe afterwards they or you will come back and say, hey, I just want to apologize for what I said back there. I was just really upset. I hope you can forgive me. It just really bothered me, and I just kind of lost my temper. That's very natural. Now, a better way to handle that situation would, of course, nip it in the bud, to recognize that anger before it explodes out of your mouth and you say things that you later regret and you later have to apologize for. Like if someone has anger that is on a hair trigger, then they're going to regularly fly off the handle, explode, and look foolish. So instead of reacting immediately and saying things that you later regret, I want you to start exercising your patience muscles. Everything is a muscle. The things we feel, the way we act, what we say, our prayer life, our heart, our spirit, it really is like muscles. And the more we exercise them, the more we put them to use, the stronger they'll be and the more natural that it will be for us. And once we can really exercise our patience muscles, get that patience stronger, more natural, then our anger and our tongue won't control us quite as much. Instead, we want our minds and our thoughtful hearts, we want to give them time to engage, to kind of think and process and act on purpose to help us figure out what we want to do. Not what you do impulsively as a knee-jerk reaction. I can't believe you did that. And how you just, the anger just leaps out of your mouth and face. But instead, give yourself time to think about what would help this situation be better for me and what can I do to make that happen. All right, that's where the slowness is a true benefit, because it slows us down and gives us time to think and respond on purpose the way we want. So if you feel yourself getting on edge, you start getting worked up, watch your temper. Listen before you speak. That's a good rule to remember. Instead of just blurting out the first thing that comes into your mind, listen first. Listen and think, and then decide, and then speak. You don't want to be the quick-tempered person that is described as foolish and displays folly. You want to be the patient person. So in those situations, what did we say last week? Take a breath, Maybe count to 10 if you've got time. Just slow down, whatever you can do to slow down a little bit so that you are in control of yourself. You don't lose control. We get ourselves into trouble and we regret it later when we lose control. We lose our cool, we lose our temper. Nobody likes that. We get embarrassed. All right, that's the folly that our verses were talking about. Instead, as we grow in wisdom, we will also grow in patience. And again, the wisdom that Proverbs is talking about is not the book learning, not the smarts, not the academic achievement. It really is a type of personal maturity and growth. It's about knowing yourself so that you can be more in control of yourself and act the way that you know God wants you to act. I think we all know like what God might want us to do in different situations or how God might want us to be in the world. The problem is that we just fly off the handle before we have time to think or control ourselves. So control, noticing and controlling, that's the big issue. Okay, let's read another verse. Chapter 15, verse 18. Proverbs 15:18. A hot-tempered man stirs up dissension, but a patient man calms a quarrel. Okay, this verse is similar to the ones that we read in chapter 14, but it uses some imagery that I don't know if you've noticed I've already been using. It's imagery of temperature. The previous verses used a lot of imagery of speed. This verse uses the imagery of temperature, hot-tempered man. And actually, you can think about how we use the language of temperature to describe emotions that we feel. Not just hot-tempered, but he's a real hothead. Or, he's a real cool customer. She's cool as a cucumber. Or if someone doesn't have any emotions, we might say, oh, he's real cold. He's a cold fish. So we have the sense of being patient as being cool and relaxed, very chill, very chill. Or then the warmer the language gets, that means like the more riled up we're getting. Oh, he's just burning up. The anger is just burning inside me, right? Fire, hotness, hot-tempered, hot-headed. And really, it's not just figurative imagery there. It's real. It's specific, because when we do get upset, we can feel our heart pumping harder. Our blood pressure goes up, right? The blood is flowing and pumping. We might even feel our face get warm and hot. And we really do feel hot, like in a literal temperature way, because we're just really worked up and our body is just charging up. It's kind of like that fight or flight reaction that we still have from like our caveman ancestors. Now that reaction is annoying, okay, because we're not in danger from saber-toothed tigers anymore. Yet our bodies, they'll still react like that and we'll still get all worked up. So not only is it annoying, but it's also one reason that it's hard for us to concentrate in that moment when our fight or flight reaction kicks in and we just kind of fly off the handle and we're really hot-headed and we lose our cool and we're just kind of going crazy. We've lost the ability to think calmly, coolly, and rationally. And that's when we make bad decisions, but they're not decisions, they're just reactions. That's when we do things that we regret because we aren't taking the time to think about what's the decision I want to make here. So that's what gets us in trouble, but at least it gives us a warning sign. So when you feel your temperature going up, your heart start beating, that's when you can tell yourself, oh, I can notice that. I feel that. All right, it's happening right now. I'm getting worked up. I need to watch myself. I need to check myself so that I don't do anything or say anything that I'll later regret. I don't want to, stir up dissension. Like our verse said, instead, I want to be little more patient to try to calm a quarrel. So we want to cool ourselves down. We want to calm whatever quarrel is around us, calm the situation down. And that's like all the verses that we've been reading in Proverbs, that maturity is good for both ourselves and the people around us. It helps other people when we are not jerks and hot-headed. It also helps us live peaceful, calm, enjoyable lives. So this verse reminds us that having a hot temper makes it worse for not just us, but everyone else. It starts quarrels. When we lose it, other people get riled up and they get angry. We start shouting, they start shouting. Suddenly there's so much arguing and dissension going on that nothing really gets accomplished. Nothing gets fixed. Nothing gets improved. And that's the real downside here. That's the dissension. I don't know if you've been in a meeting or in like a family, parents and their teenage kids. Ugh, don't get me started. Or spouses, when, one just really gets worked up and they shout something because they're upset. And then suddenly the other person shouts something and then you're shouting at each other. And then afterwards you have to have like a cool down apology time about the shouting, even though you never really addressed the initial problem that made you upset in the first place. Maybe it's a legitimate, bad thing that needs to be fixed or addressed. And you just kind of got upset a little too much, or they started shouting a little too much. So when your emotions explode and take over, and you're just just spewing everything out, then the discussion or the meeting is no longer about the issue at hand that needs focus or discussion, but it becomes about you and your emotions and your anger and your shouts, and everybody suddenly just kind of fixates on like your outburst. And then it's the fallout, and then further discussion about the fallout and your outburst and blah, blah, blah. And again, none of it is actually helping the really important issue that started the whole thing. So exercising patience helps you avoid quarrels, keeps people on track instead of getting distracted by temper tantrums. We don't want to be childish and have childish temper tantrums. Now, a model for being non-reactive and non-anxious is the same model, the same person that we can use for everything as a model in our lives. It's Jesus. There's so many wonderful stories in the Gospels where his enemies, the church leaders, would come up to him and try to trap him. And it says, like, they tried to trap him. And they would say, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that on the Sabbath. Or, who should you pay taxes to? Or what's the most important commandment? Or, just kind of like goofy, ridiculous kind of word problems to try to make him get himself into trouble by saying something irresponsible. But Jesus never took the bait. He didn't get riled up. He stayed calm. He talked to them. Usually he told them a parable or a story to really make them think. And usually they just kind of turned around either confused or amazed at what they just heard. He used those moments as teaching moments to demonstrate the Spirit of God within him. And we can do that too. We can do that too. We can use those moments as teaching moments. Okay, last verse, it's Proverbs 29:11. Proverbs 29:11. A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise man keeps himself under control. Now, the imagery here is about quantity. We've had imagery about speed, how fast, hasty, or patient you can be. We've had imagery about temperature, hot-headed or cool. This is imagery about quantity. Do we want a huge, big, explosive burst of anger so that it just bowls people over and knocks them down with all the things that are coming out, full vent to our anger? Or do we want to choose our words, speak on purpose, and actually try to change or improve the thing that we're upset about? That's a crazy idea. Do we actually want to help fix the thing that's bothering us? Well, what might help us do that? Is it giving full vent to our anger? No, it's probably, if you can stay under control, you'll probably be a lot more productive and improve things a lot more. So it goes really back to control. Are we in control of ourselves so that we can choose to help ourselves, improve things, respond in ways that we actually want to respond, not just the impulsive reactions that we regret later, but are we in control of our own words and emotions so that we act the way we want to act, which is the way that God wants us to act. I don't think anyone would choose on purpose to explode with anger or shout at someone or ruin a relationship or look foolish or embarrass themselves by what jumped out of their mouth. So choose now ahead of time. We talked about this last week. Choose ahead of time how you will respond. Choose patience. Choose to stay calm and choose to slow down, to cool off, and to keep yourself under control, as 29:11 says. Don't let anger just build in your hearts like a poison. Don't let it explode like a bomb. Instead of acting like children and looking childish who yell when they don't get their way, if you don't give a child what they want, they might throw a temper tantrum, they might throw things, break things, stomp, shout, yell. God doesn't call us to be childish. God, through the book of Proverbs especially, calls us to grow and be mature. We want to be mature. We want to act the way God wants mature believers to act in the world. So this week, try to recognize that, be thinking, be aware of what you're feeling, aware of the situation, like when you're out and about in the world and you see something, you hear something, somebody cuts you off. See if you can feel yourself acting maybe a little too fast or getting a little too hot-headed or a little too much, and try to stay in control and stay patient. It's a tough job. In fact, you'll be working on it for the whole rest of your life, but it's worth it, and it's what we're called to do. All right, we'll read some more next week. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.